Ladies and gentlemen, we are delighted to welcome all of you and those who have just joined to our webinar. I am Oli Malamov. It is a true pleasure to welcome our main speaker, Mr. Brian Wong, who's Vice President of Alibaba Global Initiatives, where his present scope of work focuses on creating capacity building programs for governments and entrepreneurs to demonstrate how e-commerce can promote inclusive development in emerging markets. During his 15-year tenure with the firm, Brian served as the Special Assistant for International Affairs to Jack Ma, the Executive Director of the Alibaba Global Leadership Program, and led the company's global sales, marketing, and business development operations, and spearheaded Alibaba's international expansion. Brian originally joined the company as its 52nd employee. Brian, welcome.
Thank you, Oliam.
Brian, if you don't mind, I would like to start by asking you some personal questions for the audience to get to know you better as one of the key figures of Alibaba. When you were in your 20s, did you envision yourself in the role that you have today? Was that path easy for you?
Well, first of all, thank you, Oliam, for this opportunity. Before I jump into your question, I first want to acknowledge and thank the Shanghai Cooperative Secretariat. This is a fruition of our discussions around digital economy, and I'm very honored to be part of this today. I'd like to acknowledge Chairman Kravchenko and thank you for your support in helping to organize this this wonderful event. And Mr. Jha, thank you for your comments. And Olim and the SCOLAR Network, what a special occasion that we have today. I'm just really excited about this opportunity today to address all of you and appreciate this honor. No, I did not expect to be here when I was in my 20s. My original pursuit in life was to be a physician, a doctor like my father. But one thing that was very important to me was to find the way to help the most number of people in the most positive way. So this was a very circuitous route of getting to Alibaba because I tried many things like I applied to medical school. I did things related to healthcare. I even considered a law profession. I worked a short time in government and eventually I ended up at Alibaba. So the answer to your question, no, I never expected this, but of course, very happy to be here and to have this opportunity to be with a company so interesting and impactful as Alibaba. Yeah.
We're used to hearing successful cases from entrepreneurs all the time, but as we all know, true experience comes from failures. Can you share with the audience one or two examples of wrong decisions that you made, and what lessons have you learned from them?
Well, that's a very good question, and I think you ask the right kind of questions, Olim. For any entrepreneur, this is often a big part of shaping who they become. And I would say that the wrong decisions in life are not necessarily bad decisions because these wrong decisions are what shape you and your worldview, but also they are what define you, and especially when you're able to come back and really make the most of those mistakes. I would say that the earlier in life you make mistakes, the better, because it gives you more chances to learn and apply the lessons that you accrue from those. So look, there's too many mistakes to share with you in today's conversation that I've made, even that Alibaba has made. But I would say that one of the mistakes that I made early in life was not fully acknowledging what my passions were in life, studying the things that I truly would have loved. My original intent was, or hope was, to have studied music and computer science in college. Of course, my father dissuaded me from that because he thought that medicine was the way to go. And medicine is a wonderful profession, especially now in light of the pandemic. We see how noble and altruistic doctors are and people in the healthcare industry. But I also think that you have to be true to yourself and identify what really motivates you so you can be good at what you want to do. There's plenty more I could share with you, but I'll try to sprinkle them in as we go through this conversation.
Right. Thank you. Based on your time working with Jack Ma, being part of the World Economic Forum Young Leaders Program and Aspen Fellowship communities, and then establishing the Alibaba Global Leadership Academy, what traits do you think make up a successful leader, and what advice do you have for young people aspiring to make an impact on their communities, especially during a crisis like this?
Sure. Again, a very important question, especially for young people. Many of your members and colleagues who are, starting their careers or really accelerating in terms of the kind of contributions they can make to their communities in their positions of leadership. At Alibaba, we really believe that mission and vision are really the most critical elements that make up a great leader. And I would say that Jack, our founder, and many of the executives now within our company, Daniel Zhang, our present chairman and CEO, and others, really focused on this idea of mission and vision. And you may hear that a lot in your life, and maybe even up till now, these words, mission and vision. But what does it actually mean? And in short, it really is. The mission is what gives you purpose in the work that you do. And all of us should be very clear as to why we do anything in life, and especially our jobs, because we spend so much time day in and day out committed to these tasks. And your vision is really kind of the how and the specifics as to what you want to achieve in order to reach that mission that you set for yourself. And so mission and vision, I think, are critical. The second thing I would say is understanding yourself, knowing yourself, and understanding what your strengths and weaknesses are, and also what motivates you. Because as a leader, by only knowing yourself first, can you then lead others? That's what allows you to be genuine. It allows you to be grounded and authentic as a leader. The third thing I would say is be courageous and risk-taking. A true leader does things that most people are not willing to do. And when Jack started Alibaba, he was willing to do something that no one believed was possible. And then many of us that joined Alibaba in the early days, people would say, "You're crazy. Why don't you go work for a large state-owned enterprise? Why don't you go work for a successful conglomerate, multinational conglomerate?" I moved from Palo Alto, California during really the start of the internet boom in 1999. eBay, Yahoo, and Google was just getting started. A lot of people would say, "Why would you even want to go to a place called Hangzhou that no one's heard of to join an internet company?" Palo Alto is where all the action is. So there's got to be something greater than just the short-term practical benefits that you hope to achieve that guides your decision making. And then finally, I think as a leader, you should be willing to sacrifice some of your own personal desires and pursuits for a greater good. What Jack Ma calls that is LQ. So he says great leaders have good IQ and good EQ. And what the love quotient really refers to is a sense of empathy and compassion for other people beyond just yourself. So hopefully those 4 or 5 things that I've shared are a good way to really define what I think makes good leadership.
Thank you so much for your answer. You just mentioned yourself, you have enormous experience working with many companies such as, Alibaba as an executive. You've also been and still is a venture capitalist. You created volunteering platforms before and during this pandemic. You just mentioned vision and mission, but also we could throw values, right, in it, which is very essential. So if we can consider this troika, if you will, an integral to any business survival and longevity, do you think in your time during your traveling around the world, what differences have you observed between countries and regions' approach vis-a-vis this troika? Do you think there are cultural variances in those approaches towards business?
So, given there's such diversity in the world in terms of religion, culture, political systems, this troika of mission, vision, and values you would think would be quite diverse when you're looking at all the great companies. But we actually did a study on this many years back, looking at a number of companies that have lasted over 100 years in terms of their history. And what we found was that actually they were all very similar in terms of their commitment to those three areas: mission, vision, and values. The truth is that this, to some extent, is quite universal. Great companies have a purpose. Great companies define how they want to achieve that mission. And great companies have a clear set of values that unite and align the employees of that company to work together in a harmonious and coherent and unified way so that they can achieve those goals. And that's what allows great companies to last over 100 years.
Alibaba has many projects and initiatives directed towards youth in emerging markets. For example, what just Secretary General just mentioned, Spring Thunder Initiative, Entrepreneur Prize Initiative, Alibaba Business School, and many others. Could you talk about them as well as share any interesting cases of business ideas developed by the attendees of Alibaba Business School, either aimed at alleviating COVID-19 or before the pandemic, that you could share? We've heard in some articles that there are also some of the students from the SCO region that are involved.
Yeah. So yes, thank you for pointing that out, Olim. You know, we are an internet company. Some said originally we're an e-commerce company. Today you can say we're an ecosystem that sort of defines the digital economy, especially along the four areas or the pillars that we refer to in the digital economy: e-commerce, payments or financial services, logistics, and big data. These four aspects constitute the digital economy today, and Alibaba's ecosystem includes all four of these. Now, why do we do things like the Alibaba Business School, or why did we initiate Project Spring Thunder and these things that you mentioned? The reason is that we believe that as an ecosystem, as a platform business, our role is to actually empower businesses, and especially small businesses, to be able to fulfill their role as the building blocks of any society. They provide services and products to the community, and technology should empower those companies to be more successful. And we say small businesses because it's the small businesses who have traditionally been left out of the formal economy. So at Alibaba Business School, and particularly when you mentioned our programs like the eFounders Fellowship and the Entrepreneurs Program, we want to impart or share that experience and knowledge with the entrepreneurs in the region. And we hope that they will then create their own mini Alibabas, which will be also the building blocks or the ecosystems of their regions. This is in Southeast Asia, in South Asia, in Africa, and we hope that we can continue to help countries in South America and also help more countries, say, in the SCO region. We've worked with entrepreneurs in Pakistan and in India, and one example I would be happy to share with you from Pakistan is an entrepreneur who started a company called Baikia, which is a logistics platform. His name is Manib Mayur. And his company actually was critical in working with companies, but also the government, to help deliver food to those areas that were not able to access food during the COVID outbreak, and with a particular focus on those that were less economically well off. So he leveraged his platform. He had a fleet of 30,000 sort of delivery motorbike service providers. And through that digital infrastructure, he was able to coordinate the delivery of food to the key areas that needed this on behalf of the larger community. Using this technology, he was able to achieve this goal that even the local government was not able to do. You see similar cases in places like Malaysia or Indonesia, where there was, on the onset, a shortage of PPE for certain hospitals. But the problem was no one really knew where the demand was required. So this entrepreneur created a platform called Rumakita, which allowed the matching of PPE suppliers to the hospitals that needed it most. And that became a national network. So there's plenty of examples like this at the onset of the crisis, but also later in terms of the recovery. I know that many parts of Central Asia are still going through this lockdown period. China went through this probably first and learn from a lot of the examples from our experience. And so a lot of these examples then we hope to share with the entrepreneurs that then they can apply to their own communities.
Thank you, Brian. I'm sure that many of our listeners are eager to know, when choosing candidates for Alibaba Business School, what are the key criteria that you are looking for?
Well, we're certainly looking for those young people. Young is defined by under 40, or in my case, maybe a little higher than that if I would like to consider myself still youth, but under 40 generally. But more importantly, those that are mission driven, that have a purpose in why they start their ventures. I mean, making money is obviously an important part of a business because you need to make it sustainable. But we don't believe that that should be the end goal of an entrepreneur. It should be about trying to solve a societal problem. So the mission driven and purpose driven aspect is critical. The second thing is to have some track record of success. If it's a fresh venture that's just getting started, it's hard to know the capabilities of that entrepreneur. So ideally, there's also some level of track record that shows that this individual has operational ability and achievement. And finally, a trait of resilience, ability to bounce back from failures. We think that failures are a very important part of the learning and also the training of an entrepreneur. And then I would say community mindedness. Individuals who not only think about themselves, but also the larger community and think about how they can help others through their businesses and their technology platforms.
Alibaba is paying a lot of attention to the development of Southeast Asia, African countries, and we've seen Alibaba Business School and other initiatives actively involve young people from these regions. Do you think it could be applicable to the SCO countries soon, too?
Absolutely. I mean, we see, with the SCO countries, how much opportunity there is for transformation and growth. I think that there's obviously a gradient in terms of the level of development within the countries, but I would say that across all of them, there is an opportunity to transform economies, either from traditional economies to digital economies, or taking economies with very little traditional infrastructure and building them from ground up into digital economies. And that actually is an advantage more than a disadvantage in today's world, because legacy systems often create barriers for that transformation. So that's why I'm just so excited to be part of today's session, Olim, is because I want to encourage the young people on this call to think about the role that they have to play in this transformation, but also the opportunity. This is a unprecedented opportunity before them to make an impact on their communities if they decide to take on a role as an entrepreneur and build what will be the future digital economy in their countries. And COVID is a big challenge. It has, really affected everyone in businesses across the board. But at the same time, you're all young, and this is almost like a restart. And so I think that if there's any motivation to do something now, to look positively upon the future, it's that this is an opportunity for all of you, the young people, to define your country's future. Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. We're gathered here also because of the handbook that you just published, Digital Action for Entrepreneurs in the Age of COVID-19. What drove you and your team to take time and come up with the handbook? Could you share with us Alibaba's experience during COVID-19 and the markets you have presence in? What lessons did you learn from the period?
Sure. I mean, Olim, this was a very obviously stressful time for all of us, starting in the end of January all the way till now. But I'd say that there was a moment where our team was sitting around talking about what we could do to sort of help the situation. And all around us at the company, each of the business units were doing amazing things to help those employees that were being affected by this, but also the larger community. We had a response that was both internal and external. And the internal response was really building what we call the 3 C's amongst the team. And that was communication, connection, and commitment. Making sure that everyone knew what was happening, making sure that we were all in contact with one another, and making sure that we all knew what it was that we were trying to achieve together. And on the external side, we said that we want to leverage our platform and technology, number one, first to save lives, second to support SMEs in their survival, and third to help the larger society. So then how do you take the external, internal, and package that in a way that other people can understand so that they have some inspiration to think about how they can leverage their skills and abilities in technology to help their communities? So that's how the digital action handbook came into existence. We felt that with 2 months sort of advanced experience, that we had a responsibility to share these lessons with the rest of the world through this handbook, but also help them envision and visualize what technology can do for the world. Not everything in that handbook is doable for many companies because Alibaba now is a very large organization. But at the same time, it can help you envision what technology can do for the community and then give some ideas and inspiration, because there are things that are cited in that handbook that are immediately actionable. And maybe it's not actionable just with your company alone, but it's also actionable in partnership with other platforms, other entrepreneurs. And we actually saw that happen in Asia and Africa. Our own entrepreneurs came together and created major platforms through partnership that had impact across the larger community and regions. So I won't go into too much detail about the handbook because I'd encourage everyone to download it. But I would say that we've broken this down in terms of the problems, the solutions, and then the impact, so that people can look at and reference this guide, whether it's in e-commerce, whether it's in payments, whether it's in logistics, whether it's in HR policies and approaches. All those areas are sort of magnified so people can get a better understanding of what was the thought process that Alibaba went through.
Right. Thank you, Brian. We have so many questions that are right now coming in from our attendees. So I'll have my last question if you allow me. Sure. So we could sort through the questions from the participants, and then we'll go to those questions if you don't mind. Okay. So my question would be, Alibaba believes that entrepreneurs should be treated like heroes because they're the backbone of society. Entrepreneurs, you say in the handbook, that are nimble, resilient, innovative. However, it is known that in some SEO cultures, business owners aren't treated as heroes. Unfortunately, they are viewed as maybe suspicious and not a particularly positive force of society. These sentiments have deep historic roots, some might say, but even now, during a crisis that should in theory unite a society, businesses continue to be ridiculed. How can this culture change and entrepreneurs can be looked at as heroes that they are, like Olympic or professional athletes, if you will?
Yeah. Well, Olim, I'll tell you, when I was in college, I thought that business was the epitome of evil. I had long hair. I wanted to be like I said, a doctor and work in frontier markets. Médecins Sans Frontières was like my dream job. I never thought that business would be the solution to helping people until I spent time in China, until I came to really understand what you could do with business as a tool for enablement. And frankly, when I met Jack, because his vision was so compelling, I think that business is a tool, but whether it's good or bad is how you use it. And this is why we talk about the importance of mission and vision, is because if you have a purpose in creating the business that is more than just yourself, more than just profit, and that especially when it's focused on solving social issues, it can be one of the most powerful and effective tools. And the great thing is that it's all within our reach as individuals. You don't have to have some special pedigree. You don't have to be in a special position of power. You can be an average person. And Jack Ma is the perfect example, a guy who failed his college exams multiple times, someone who a lot of people didn't think would become this amazing individual that he has, and especially the contributions he's made. But he's an example of someone that just really believed in what he could do or what was possible and pursued it. And that's what all entrepreneurs can be. That's what Bill Gates was. That's, you could say, Zuckerberg, many of the great entrepreneurs in technology that you think about have very humble backgrounds. And I think what's particularly compelling about Jack is it's an entrepreneur from an emerging market that a lot of people said, maybe, is innovation possible in a place like China? Absolutely. Is innovation possible in a place like Uzbekistan? Absolutely. Russia already has its great examples, with Yandex and Mail.ru, and many of the companies there are started by entrepreneurs. And it will be up to the entrepreneurs, it'll be up to the people in this group to decide if they want to be the future heroes of their community, and if they are going to be the ones to create something good for society. I think business has been, the reputation has been impacted by those people who are short-term focused, who are thinking purely about personal profits, and even that belief that the role of a corporation is to purely is to maximize shareholder value. Milton Friedman, we were taught that in business school. We were taught that theory. But, even in America now, something called the Business Roundtable has revised their mandate or their statement of purpose to include more than just shareholders' profits. It's about society. It's about people. It's about the employees. There are many stakeholders. And I think that the sooner that we recognize business has that role, the better off we will all be, because we'll be leveraging the strength of our community to help society and not just help the individuals that start the businesses.
Brian, thank you so much for your answers. Thank you so much for your speech. Truly, truly, truly inspiring for all of us. We have many questions, and we would like to get some of those questions. Some of them are we have translated. Brian, if we could start with one of the questions from Mr. Iskandar Ikrami from Tajikistan. What specific digital technologies were already introduced in Alibaba in China or around the world during the height of the pandemic? From these technologies, what were the e-commerce platforms, and what continues to work to this day?
Okay, very good question. I would say that there were a number of services that were launched or pre-existing by Alibaba that were extremely relevant to the pandemic and obviously continue today. I will say, though, that the pandemic also helped to accelerate the adoption of these services and magnify the importance of these services. So the first one would be around just general e-commerce. And e-commerce, there are two aspects of that. One is just this integration of online to offline. So a lot of our delivery services, that link to e-commerce businesses, enabled people to be able to buy essential products and even food and services through an online platform, even though they were quarantined at home. And so I would say that particularly this was true around our business, one called Fresh Hippo. It was a grocery store. We actually mandated that all our Fresh Hippo stores, over close to 200 of them throughout China, stayed open during the pandemic. And we utilized our logistics services too to ensure that the supplies were kept fulfilled so that people would not fear that they would run out of food or the necessary supplies. This is very important because psychologically, if you fear that you will not have access to food or the most essential items, you are going to panic, and that's going to create huge societal unrest. So we made it a point to keep these stores, even in Wuhan during the pandemic outbreak, when the rest of the city was locked down. We made sure that these grocery stores, the Fresh Hippo stores, were well stocked with the food and the resources needed, and then be able to deliver these products. And so the other critical piece of this, beyond just the Fresh Hippo grocery stores, were the F&B establishments. Many restaurants had no foot traffic. Many of the mom and pop shops that sold fruit and produce had no foot traffic. How do you ensure that you can keep these stores open? Well, we actually created a plug and play sort of interface that allowed these mom and pop shops that generally were not technologically enabled to get online very quickly, within a day or two, to set this up. And then we mobilized our delivery service called Ulama, which is essentially a food delivery service. We enhanced that capability so that they could deliver on behalf of these restaurant and food stores. And again, this enabled the stores to stay in business, but to allow people to access more of the supplies that they needed. And in delivering the products, we created a non-touch delivery method. So we had a designated area in each residential area that the delivery people would drop off the goods, and then the consumer would come and pick it up without actually having to interact with the humans face to face. So all these things contributed to fulfilling the needs of the consumers, ensuring that businesses were able to survive during that time, and also ensuring that the supply chain was maintained. Now, that's the e-commerce side. On the financial services side, and financial, which is our financial services business, had two particular services that I think were very important. One was microloans to the small businesses. That is all done through a mobile device. If you have a business and you want to apply for a microloan, all it takes is 3 minutes to fill out a form, 1 second for it to be processed, and 0 people to actually be required to deploy that loan because it's all done through the digital infrastructure. So microloans were important because this allowed companies to access working capital when their business had dried up. And these loans were offered at a very, how should I say, a favorable rate, sometimes even deferring the interest payments because of the financial difficulty these companies were facing. The second is insurance. And insurance, as we know, I mean, this is health insurance. It's insurance that really was protecting frontline workers, protecting those who potentially got sick, because we know that people can go bankrupt because of the costs involved in cases of illness. And so these insurance programs are very affordable because essentially you're spreading the risk amongst a large group of people, and people are all able to afford it, but at the same time, it's able to protect them. And I think that that was also a very important part. Not to mention just digital payments alone is an important part of health, how should I say, prevention of spreading of the disease, because even touching the money has the risk of spreading the virus. So I think that all those elements played a critical role in addressing the pandemic, but moving forward, I think that those will become much more prevalent and more highly adopted. One other area I would say with regard to logistics, I mentioned that in terms of the last mile delivery, but also green channels to ensure that products and supplies could get delivered between regions, between rural and city areas. We addressed an issue in terms of the rural isolation when the logistics chains got blocked. A lot of the food was perishing. But what we did is create green channels in partnership with local governments and whatnot to ensure that these logistics carriers met the health standards in terms of the delivery and the protection you gave the individuals. Many of them had to be quarantined just doing one delivery, but at the same time, you ensured that the products moved across borders between the provinces. And then finally, I'd say cloud computing, giving access to medical research institutes and all other healthcare related organizations to utilize the computing power to do genomic sequencing, to do CT scan analysis. We created applications that allowed for the acceleration of those services in order to provide support to the hospital workers to do their job more effectively. And also in small businesses, DingTalk, a communications tool, which hopefully some of you have used, is allowed for remote working of up to 200 people to do their day-to-day work from their homes because of these tools. Not unlike Zoom, which we're using right now, but a more robust sort of productivity tool. As well as education institutions, we provided that to over 1 million schools to help them do online classes. Many of these things happen without us knowing that they're going to happen, but we had the infrastructure in place, we had existing tools, and we put them to use and provided them to those who needed it.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for this comprehensive answer. And it's truly, you have done so much work just in the period of the past 3 months. I hope that answers Iskandar's question. Brian, we have to ask the question that was the most popular of the our Q&A session here. This is from Kyrgyzstan. Dear Brian, right now trade between China and Central Asian states is very low key because of the financial and logistical barriers. Many deals are arranged unofficially, which prevents our governments to collect taxes and develop. Is there an opportunity to connect Alibaba to local trading platforms? There is an international platform, AliExpress, but our citizens are not very familiar with it.
Okay. So, I've thought about this question in the last few days, and looking at Central Asia in particular, because that represented the critical link between the East and the West, many centuries ago, rich civilization, rich culture, and a strategic location. And I think that the challenge today, as we think about how we are going to incorporate all of the regions in this area into trade, is really about building the fundamental infrastructure that was talked about, the physical infrastructure with regard to roads and logistics. And fortunately, there is plans between the governments to build this physical infrastructure, whether it's Belt and Road and related initiatives. But then on top of that, you need to make it smart. So that's where you have the digital infrastructure. Now, we have an initiative called the Electronic World Trade Platform, which is essentially a vision to create a number of nodes and hubs which connect the digital ecosystem or economy and really help small businesses become part of that formal international trade economy. We have hubs in Malaysia, in Rwanda, in Belgium, in Ethiopia, obviously in China. But Central Asia is a location that I think would also do well to be served by this, and that will come in due time as the team starts to build out these infrastructure. But I think that what you can do in the time being is really the entrepreneurs themselves think about what are the problems that are most pressing now in your countries, and what can you do as an entrepreneur to help address that. You can express your concerns and needs also to your local government so that they know how they can help entrepreneurs and businesses help push forward this digital economy agenda. And also, yes, you can look at existing platforms. So AliExpress is one of our platforms that helps connect manufacturers directly to the end consumer. And that's AliExpress has a number of different product categories covered. And I would encourage people to look at those platforms like that to see how they can source products for their countries where there is that need. But also think about the bigger picture in terms of how do you build your capabilities locally so that you can ensure that people have more access to these platforms, but also can get the products in an efficient way, because logistics, as you mentioned, is the biggest challenge, which often means that it takes a long time to get those products from abroad.
Thank you, Brian. Another question that we have that you touched upon a little bit. We have a question from Kazakhstan, from the chief editor of Business Kazakhstan, about the Belt and Road and how Alibaba plans to integrate with the Belt and Road, or are there already any works that have been done in that regard?
Well, look, I wouldn't say there are any formal relationships with Belt and Road specifically, except that I think Belt and Road identifies where there is a need for inclusivity of the formal economy in the global economy. And so there are definitely many markets where we operate that are part of the Belt and Road initiative. And I think that over time, as we see, because I think there are some basic requirements for e-commerce to happen, and one of them is the physical infrastructure. So of course, once you have the physical infrastructure, then the e-commerce is more likely to start to happen. So I guess we are very much about empowering these small businesses in the markets that have not yet been served yet. And to that extent, I think there is definitely a common goal and a common interest. I think that what we need to do as a company as well, though, is to prove success in the markets that we're trying to demonstrate what that vision is, so that other people will have faith and confidence that this is possible. So we have Lazada, which is our Southeast Asian business, which is really working to bring this digital economy vision to those countries. Daraz is our business in South Asia, countries like Sri Lanka and Pakistan, Bangladesh. They operate. We have a number of joint venture partners that do payment systems in partnership with Ant Financial, so that they have an integrated payment system that eventually can work together, not only domestically, but cross-border through a network. And then we also have Trendyol, which is in Turkey, which is also helping to build out the e-commerce. So these are all sort of Alibaba family businesses. But it doesn't mean that countries that are not within that sphere are not also able to eventually interface with the platforms. And I think that, again, this is really going to be up to the young people to say, how do I prioritize my efforts, and how do I work with the larger sort of global community to create something that will link us all together. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, of course, in Russia, we have AliExpress, which is a joint venture, and obviously one of the most important businesses for us in that region. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Brian. I think that what you say about linking everybody together, all of the countries together, I think Alibaba is doing a tremendous job. And of course, you being at the forefront of many of the initiatives really is an asset, not only to Alibaba, but to all of the SCO countries, to all of the region and the world. Before we end this, as we discussed, we would like to ask you maybe a Blitz questions, one-word answer from you personally. if you don't mind.
Prepare myself. Okay.
All right, you ready? Let's do it. Brian, what was your dream job when you were a kid?
Okay, well, I mentioned this one. It was working for Médecins Sans Frontières as a doctor in emerging markets. That was my dream job. Doctors Without Borders is the name of that. Yeah.
Right. If you were to speak to one more language immediately, which one would you pick?
Well, after this, all the research I've done around SEO in meeting so many of you, I actually would want to learn a language that would open up a whole new world to me. And I think Russian would be a very interesting language that would give me access to so many more countries that I've never visited. Yeah.
Perfect. Great language. Which book are you reading? Which book are you reading at the moment?
So the one I'm still working on is called Critical Path by an author, inventor, futurist named Buckminster Fuller. And he talked about a world where, thanks to technology, you have a world of abundance, not scarcity. And what it requires is that all people work together, because then you wouldn't have the conflicts that you have today, because everybody is able to be taken care of. And Buckminster lived up till the 1980s, but his ideas, I think, are very relevant to today's world. And Critical Path really represents the critical path to creating a more harmonious world, and he lays them out in actually a number of steps. So I'm halfway through, and I'm very intrigued by this idea, because what he lays out sounds to me like a much better world than we have today.
Which is the main skill for an entrepreneur to have nowadays?
I think in today's world, adaptability is so critical. We say at Alibaba, the only constant is change. And I think more than ever, we're seeing that the plan that you normally set for yourself never ends up happening the way you expect. But how you react and adapt to that change is going to be the secret to your success.
What piece of advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Well, I would say seek out mentors, but at the same time, know yourself and what's important to you, and try and pursue your vision or your mission in your life with all your energy and passion, because that ultimately will get you to a place in life when you look back, say 80 years into it, that you feel very content and satisfied with. So I would say that, you know, the mentors give you the wisdom, but the motivation comes from your personal mission.
Wow, amazing. Thank you so much, Brian. We have so many questions, but one question that also received some votes had to do with, do you think that Alibaba School of Business may someday be established in one of the SCO countries, perhaps in Central Asia?
So I'm glad you asked that, and I meant to mention to comment this earlier. We do have a program called the Global E-commerce Talent Program, and we work with universities around the world, the local universities, to co-develop digital economy curriculum. So I'm happy to say that so far in Uzbekistan and in Russia, we have partnerships with schools. We are looking at many other SCO member organizations to develop this program. We have a global entrepreneurship competition that we welcome all the young people to participate in. Unfortunately, this right now it's just been closed, but we have 80 entries from Russia and 120 from Uzbekistan, and next year we'll have the same competition. So yes, we will have eventually, or we do aspire to be able to share the Alibaba Business School knowledge and curriculum with the rest of the world, and many SCO countries will be part of that in the near future. So stay tuned.
Thank you so much, Brian. It has truly been inspirational